Rabbis, especially the ancient sages, are hypersensitive when it's come to people's feeling. It's a story about one of the sages in the past generation. He's a rabbi from a city called Chebin. While he was teaching a Talmud class to his students, one of his students who was not so involved and enthusiastic, at the midst of his shi'ur lesson, he challenged something, and he opened the book, the Rosh, which was one of the ancient commentary, and he showed the Chebin Rav, the rabbi, the source. And the rabbi looked at the source and he said, all right, the lesson, the shi'ur is over. Close the book, it's over. And it was before the time that the class should be over. So several other bright students asked a question. They said, we look at the Rosh, we look at the source, and it's really not a big question. And the rabbi answered and he said, look, this student never asked question, and I look at his eyes, and it looks like if I tell him he's right, it gives him a great satisfaction, and I felt that it's worth it. So you see today a lot of examples of how hypersensitive our ancient sages, and also a lot of practical halachot in the nuances, especially in a sensitive subject of breaking up families, breaking up relationships with divorce. Page 116, 4 lines from the top of the page. Hahu gita deishtakach besura. So here is a story about certain get, bill of divorce, that was found in the Babylon city named Sura. Uchtiv beihachi, as we learned in the past, the language of the get, bill of divorce, has to be in a certain specification. Here, it's different. It's something like awkward in a way. Besura mata, in the city of Sura, Anan Barchia Nahardea. The name of the fellow is Anan, which was a common name in those days, from a different city, Nahardea. If you remember when we talked history, it was 3 big cities of learning. It was Sura, Pumpedita, and Nahardea. So here, in the language of the get, they said that his name is Anan Barchia from Nahardea, Patarit vetarechit plonit inteti. I exempt, divorced my wife, so and so. Now, she claimed that she received the get. This is not a get, this is just a declaration. So she wants to receive from the Bet Din heter nisuin, that the Bet Din allow her to go ahead and to marry someone else by having this document. So, as we explained yesterday, there are several issues here. In general, we talk about zihui pnei hamet. If there are situations that you do not recognize the body, this is pre-DNA era, so you just have to take her testimony at a face value. And the concern we explained yesterday is he may come back, the real husband. So, what do? So, ubadku rabanan misura ad nahardea, meaning the sages especially think ancient time, they made a huge research for the entire Nahardea county, or a large place, and we derive from that by the way, the specification that the get needs to have, we explained, if you remember yesterday, the location, the time. ולא הווה ענן ברכיה אחרינה, לבר מענן ברכיה מחגרה. They could not find anyone the same name, excluding another guy from a village or city by the name of Chagra that carries the same name. Dahava benahardea. The Ramban explained that he moved from Chagra to the city, big city of Nahardea. So what's the concern? It may happen that the second Anan Bar Chia wrote this get and not her husband. Rabbeinu Time explained in Tosfot that it may happen that this Anan Bar Chia commanded to write this get for the wife of his friend in order to ruin her, which happens, as we explained many times, in a relationship. Anything and everything can happen. People can do clandestine approbations of something that is wrong. People can pay back or backstab other people for all kind of other motivations. Can be money, can be act of paying back, revenge for other family members. It's all kind of nuances that people does things.
So in other words, putting her in a position where she's violating essentially a karet.
That's the way Rabbeinu Times try to say.
I mean, that's basically what he's saying. Wow.
But there is a Aruch Laner can go the other way around. It's a big question because you can go and say that this guy is basically cooperating with her either for payment or for other reason in order to release her.
Right.
Because he carried the same name. Ve'atu sa'adeh ve'amu. So wait a second. The witnesses came and said, come on. Da'u yoma ki ekativa ugita anan barchia mechagra gabanava. Did you ever heard the claim of alibi? Right? In a crime scene. Here you have two witnesses that came to before the Beit Din and said, you know what? This guy, he was with us, not in Surah, in Nahardea, which is a very different location. Surah is the location of written the get. He was with us from the morning to the evening in Nahardea. There is a concept which we learn in Ilchot Gitin that's called Edei Mesira. You have a witness that they handed over the get to her. These two witnesses claim that this guy at that day from the morning to the evening was with them in Nahardea. Amar Abaye, the other way around, Machloket Hafucha. He said, Aflet Didi de Amina, even in my view that usually Chayshinan Hacha, that we are concerned about another person carries the same name. Hacha, in this case, Lo Chayshinan. I'm not concerned that this get was written by the second Anan Barchia. The Ha Ka'amri Sahadi Divnahade Ava. Because those witnesses over this person declare that the date of the get was written in Surah, he was with us in a far away in Nahardea. My be'abe Surah. What did you do over there? So therefore this get belongs to that woman. Now Rashi add to that, and he said, you know, the only thing you should check if there's no third Anan Barchia in at this moment, because the second one was that day with the different witnesses in different location. Rava disputed, Amar Rava, Af leridid lo chayshinan, that no one carried that name. Hacha chayshinan. Here I'm concerned. Why? Dilma begamla paracha azal. So maybe he went with a flying camel, meaning nowadays maybe you have a private jet. He was in one location one time and the other location the other time. It's like we read a few weeks ago about Moshe Rabbeinu, about Yaakov Avinu, that he used the Shem Amforash, and he jumped, Kfitzat Aderech. He went from one location to another. But the idea is, it may happen that in some way, Inami, big Kfitza, as we said it, either Meiri said that he was a runner, or maybe he used the name. So it's a lot of ideas how that can happen. Nowadays it's much simpler, right?
I like the flying camel.
Flying camel. All right. Inami milei basar, which means that there is a Tosfot bringing the Gemarrah in Makot. The whole idea that imanu aita, that you are without us. But the idea is, since we specify the place of the signature, here is the issue, that the order was in one city, Nahardea, but the place, the location of the get was a Suakda. Amaru Rav Lesafrei. Rav said to those scribes who writing that, V'chen amar lo Ravuna Lesafrei, ki itnechu beshili ktovu beshili, which means all those permissive note, right, or other type of documentation, you have to speak about you have to spell out the location of the contract. That's a few places. You have it in Gemara and Bava Batra, 172. Anyway, so Afal Gav the Mimseran Milei Behini, even it's a different location, and also the other way around. Vechi itnechu behini ktovu behini aval gav de mimseran lehei beshili. So the location is crucial. So therefore it can happen that it's in a different location, and therefore I'm concerned, and you cannot return that get to the wife of Anan Barchia, the first one. So now we go back to the machloket we mentioned yesterday, in between Rav Chizda and Rabbah, in regards to the sesame. If you remember yesterday we talked about a guy that was guard. He was guarding. So for example, you give some valuable item to someone. Mr. A gave it to Mr. B. And then Mr. A come to Mr. B and said, give it back to me. And Mr. B said, I gave it to you. And he said, wait a second, I see it over there. He said, it's not yours. Okay, so they ask a question when in the case of sesame, that's exactly what happened. Whom you trust and how. My hava alayu deshum shumei. Rav Yeimar amar lo chayshinan. We're not concerned that maybe the guard did anything and therefore the guard needs to return them. Ravina amar chayshinan. So, meaning that the concern is that maybe they switch. V'hilchata chayshinan. The truth is, it makes a lot of sense, because we are concerned about the possibility that they barely replaced them with others, and we do not rely on the distinguishing marks provided by the claimant in this case. Now we learn very painful part in the Mishnah in regards to a fight or feud, disputation between couple. Ktata beno leveina. There is unfortunately fight between him and her. She come before the Bet Din and she said, my husband is dead. So trace the situation. They went together to Honolulu for vacation. She comes back and she said, we went on a boat, he jumped from the boat, he sank and he's gone. So according to the Mishnah, she is not, you cannot trust, you cannot take her word and said it's over. So now we elaborate. So we said, let's go to the specification. What do you mean by saying that there was a fight between them? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel באומרת לבעלה גרשני. If wife said to her husband while they are fighting, divorce me. So they said, no, kuluna me'amura achei. When some wives, here they use the term everyone, let's say some, right? When they get angry and they are fighting, they, at the time of anger, they can say, you know, divorce me. So that's considering a ktata, a fight that disqualified her trust to come and witness that her husband is gone. Imagine a lady comes before the bedin, and she said she's not crying, she doesn't have a torn garments, right? Like we said yesterday. She just comes peacefully to the bedin and she says, my husband is gone. And one of the dayanim hear her whispering, thank God, right? So the question is, what do you do? So the Gemara tried to clarify that. It said, Ela be'omeret leba'ala geirashtani. She said, usually they make a peace later. But here, the hatred is so bad that the Chazon Ish tells us in chapter 30 that she can even go the next step, which is being untruthful in regard to his passing, that he is not gone, and she claimed that he is. So the Gemara said, "Velem hemnei mid Rav Amnuna." The Amar Rav Amnuna, isha she'amra leba'ala gerashtani ne'emenet. Chazaka en isha meiza panea bifnei ba'ala. If she is saying to him, divorce me, constantly, she said. So we hold that usually they don't do that. Right. Sometimes they may say, nimasli, I'm giving up, it's too much, I can't take it anymore, divorce me, but then they can change their mind. So the issue is, she claimed that she received a get and is lost. So the Gemara now explained it, and they said, let's see the situation. She's going to all of her girlfriends, all her friends, and she said, it's over. My husband divorced me. You know, it can be nowadays on the Facebook or on the right, or Twitter, or whatever it is.
Instagram, I can send a picture. Yeah.
She says, it's over, goodbye. Now, is that over? True? We don't know. באומרת גירשתני בפני פלוני או פלוני ושאלנה ואמרו לו היו דברים מעולם. She said, you divorced me at the front of Mr. A and Mr. B. And somebody from the bed didn't go to them and says, is that true? And the guy said, no, it never happened. Right? So again, remember we talked yesterday about imaginations, right? So since she already caught in being the person who exaggerates the truth, right? So you cannot trust, you cannot take her word. Maita ma diktata. Why you cannot take her word when she said my husband is gone? When it's a fight, you go, you know, I remember as a kid, sometimes we used to go and do mishloach manos, we used to do things, go around people. You're standing outside of the apartment, and you hear screaming and yelling between a husband and wife. When you see that, I remember as a child, I just came back and said, you know, we need to go there again because I can't knock the door while I was very uncomfortable, right? So when you see this type of situation, and she said, my husband is gone, the next hour she comes, she said he's gone. Rav Chanina Amar Mishum de Mishakra, because this is such a psychological item. You see how deep the rabbis understand. They said she hated him so badly that she even go to that level, which is she knew that the truth will come out. And she hates him so much that she doesn't mean to be truthful. She wants on purpose to prohibit herself to him. Rav Shimi Barashi amar mishum de'amra bidedame, which means, you know, the famous Gemara that said, Ezer kenegdo, zacha Ezer, if the man merited, she is a help, corresponding help. Lo zacha is not merited kenegdo, she's fighting him. There's no in between. So here, she is having in her imagination that he's dead. She's dreaming about it all the time, right? It gets to her brain in such a level that she's already believed that he's dead. So what's the difference? My benayu, what's the halachic difference between the two views? 116b, Ika benayu de'argel hu ktata, meaning either you said that he's a cognitive dissonant, or you said that he starts, put her down, like Rashi tells us on page 26a, putting it down, and then it's increased, the fight in such a level of feud, of anger, that she went ahead and she said, you divorced me in the front of so and so. So it means he was the one who started up. So according to Rav Chanina, that he is concerned that she will be untruthful because of her hate, that even intentionally she lied. So therefore, she is trustworthy in that sense to say that he is gone. So therefore, this is one way. But the other way is Rav Shimi Barashi said that she just using her imagination, cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. So you're concerned that even in that situation, even like small things, that it's already created an atmosphere of imagination, that she believes such a level, right, that the in her cognitive mindset, she's thinking that he's dead. So here, Tosfot and Meiri said, therefore you cannot take her word and say that he is gone. Just remember what we studied in 87b, which Tosfot also mentioned, Meiri, that she is aware of all the knasot, all the punishments, right, for being caught. Anyway, another subject in regards to this issue of frictions, Ibayalu, Ed echad biktata ma'u. So if you have one witness that testified that someone is gone, it's a result of a friction between him and her, and as a person went to, let's say, to Japan or to Amazonas, right, South America, and one witness come back and said that the husband is gone. So do you allow her to go ahead and marry someone or not? Tama de'ed echad me'man mishum de'milta da'avida legiluye lo meshaker. You tell me that you accepting one witness because you figured out that something that is going to be revealed, a person is not going to lie. So we have the assumption that this is truthful. Hachaname, you may think the same way, that when is a friction between husband and wife, the witness lo meshaker, or dilma, or you may say, Tama de'ed echad me'man, the reason that one witness is trustworthy to testify before the rabbinic court that the husband is no longer among the living, mishum dehi daika uminaseva, as we explained, that she is very concerned. It's her reputation, it's her future. So therefore she is very scrupulous to dig in and to make sure in her investigation that he is gone before she were going ahead to marry someone else. But here, since there is a hatred, it's a fight or even bigotry between the two, lo daika minasva, let's talk in exaggeration, that she wants on purpose to prohibit herself to her husband, or since she made up her mind that he is gone, so therefore she can go to that level. And she is not searching so well to make sure that he is gone. I remember years back when I started this job, about 13 years ago. Not going to mention name. I don't think that people around here remember that case, but anyway, we had the bar mitzvah boy. One time he came to a lesson, to a bar mitzvah lesson, who was falling apart, this little boy. And I said to him, so and so, I can't mention even if his first name, what's happening, and it took me sometimes to ledovev oto, to bring him to a point that he will speak up. And he said that, you know, the parents divorced and everything, and father was not Jewish. Anyway, he said that his father was a cancer for a long time, and his father passed. But he said the mother, or the ex-mother, whatever you call it, decided, the ex-wife, yeah, she decided to cremate him. Not just cremate him, but she decided to take the ashes and throw it to the ocean, in the bay. And the worst part, she asked this little boy, who were like 12 and a half years old, to be there, because she wants to make sure that any memory from his father is over from his head. Imagine the level of hatred that people can go, you know, to such a level. Not only to cremate her ex, and not only to put the ashes in the water, but to take the only son, and she's in her, I think, 50s, so she most probably cannot have children, and to make sure that he knows that it's over. Anyway, so you see here how far people can go. Anyway, so the Gemara concluded and said, Teiko. So it means that there is no solution. So the way that the Meforshim said, the Rosh and Rashba and others, that we have to go lechumrah. Anyway, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Leolam Eina. That's the last clause of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda tells us that the wife is never deemed credible when she testified that her husband died, unless she came carried and her clothing was torn, while the majority of the sages say that she may remarry in any case. So if you remember, just to refresh your memory, there is a concept that Rav Yehuda required a simanei avelut. He wants to see a real act of mourning. The only assumption, I have my own svara, that there are people who are good actors.
Right.
So anyway, Tanya Amru lo leRabbi Yehuda. The majority of the sages challenged that, and he said to Rabbi Yehuda, lidvarecha. You meant to say what? Pikachat tinase, shota lo tinase. You mean to say only if she comes before us, heartbreaking, full of tears, tearing apart her clothing, right? That's the only way. But someone whom she gets used to walk like that, with a tearing garments, with a terrible clothing, terrible appearance, she's just not always 100% normal. So that one cannot be married. You can't do that. The majority of sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, forget about simanei avelut, to show that she's mourner. Just leave it alone and let her marry someone. Story. Hahu de atya levei dina de Rabbi Yehuda. So here is a case of a woman that come before the bed din, but it's not just a bed din, specifically a bed din of Rabbi Yehuda. Remember Rabbi Yehuda? He said that she needs to appear a person who mourns. Amrale, the sages said to her before she go to a court session, they took her aside and said, guess what? When you go before Rabbi Yehuda, before this court, Safdi balech, kir'im anayich, sitri mazyech. Rabbi Yehuda is not going to take your testimony if you appear like, you know. So you have to show that you are total broken. So the Gemara said, Alfu shikra, they train her to lie? What does that mean? They're going to train her to mislead the Bedi? So they said, no, inu kerabanan svira lehu. They hold, as the sages tell us, the early sages, that you don't need all of that. That it's enough for her to come regardless. Right. But since they know that this specific bet din of Rabbi Yehuda will not take it in a face value if she is not acting up, so therefore they ask her to do it. Amrei, they said, Ta'aved hachrei ki heichel elishra. That's the way to do it. So the Meiri said that it's a big malach in the Meiri, if that's okay for an emissary of one bedin to do it to another. Anyway, we go to the next Mishnah. The previous Mishnah tells us that if a wife and husband went overseas and she came back and she said, my husband is gone, we take her words and she allowed to go ahead and marry again. Now the Mishnah tells us that it's originally a disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, how far you go by ne'emanut isha, because let's face it, people sometimes are subjective. Sometimes there is other motivation for her to say certain things. Beit Hillel אומרים, לא שמענו אלא בבא מן הקציר. When we say that we take her as a married woman and we accept her word, if she come from the grain harvest. ובאותה מדינה, if she testified in the same country where he died, וכמעשה שהיה, and in circumstances similar to the incident that occurred in which a lenient ruling was issued as will be explained. אמרו להם בית שמאי, בית שמאי respond to בית הלל, אחת הבאה מן הקציר, ואחת הבאה מן הזיתים, ואחת הבאה מן הבציר. It's no difference between if one come from the grain harvest, the olive harvest, or the grape harvest. ואחת הבאה ממדינה למדינה, one who come from country to another country. Because even you have the incident in question took place during the grape harvest, לא דיברו בקציר אלא בהווה. This is not speaking about the grain harvest only because it was present occurrence, which means that is what happened in practice, but this is not proof that she deemed credible only when she arrived specifically from the grain harvest. So therefore, Chazru Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel retracted their opinion, and the rules leorot ke Beit Shammai. They follow Beit Shammai. So you see here that they change. So Tanya אמרו להם בית שמאי לבית הלל ולבריכם, אין לי אלא מקציר חיטים, מקציר שעורים מנין, according to view that it's specifically from where? From the wheat harvest. But how do you know about a case like from the barley harvest? That she is trustworthy? ואין לי אלא קוצר, בוצר, מוסק, גודר, עודר, מנין. You may say that this is specifically only when they reap grain. How do you know that the same applies to harvest grains, harvest olives, harvest dates, or harvest figs? The story happened with the grain harvest, and the same applied to all the this incident occurred in one place in that country, והוא הדין לכולו. It applies to all the other incidents. Even she come from traveling far away, and she testified that the husband is gone. Ubeit Hillel, how did Beit Hillel respond to this claim? Because they agreed that there is no difference between the harvests and the trust of the wife, because you cannot differentiate between the two. But if you speak about the distance that she came from, so only if she come from the specific land for specific country, like this story, it's one thing. But באותה מדינה דשכיחה אינשי, that people can come, as we said, and can testify in regards to the incidents that occurred with her husband, mirtat, she is concerned because if it's milta da'avida legilui, if this is something that we are going to reveal, remember what we said yesterday, that this is something that people don't do, especially if she knows that there is a heavy fine the bedin impose upon her if she caught lying. So therefore she is trustworthy in her witness. The verse is if it's a different country that it's not so common, she is not afraid to be untruthful, so therefore you cannot accept her witness face value. The Beit Shammai respond to this by saying here, when she is testified that the husband is gone in a different country, she is also concerned to be untruthful. Why? It's again, in those days it was shayarot. It's like a group of travelers, the travelers, for example, with horses wagon or with camels, etc., from one land to another. So she is still concerned that they can come and bear a witness in a court the other way around. And therefore, even here, she is trustworthy. So even the rabbis say that it's less possible that this is something that, in other words, it's hard to get investigation, that matter, to get the travelers to come before the bedin and testify that the husband is in that location. But even though, so it's not really milta davida legilui, it's something that people will reveal. Yet, even in that case, she's still ne'emenet, she still can be trusted that it's the truth. Mai ma'aseh shaya. So now the Gemara explained to us what is the story that the sages made the institution that the wife is ne'emenet, she's trustworthy to say the husband is gone. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, shilfei ktsir chitin hayu. Shilfei, it's the same as shlifat na'al, which means that was the season of harvest. So that was the time of the end of the harvest period, harvest season. והלכו 10 בני אדם לקצור חיטים. It was 10 men that went to collect the harvest. נשכו נחש לאחד מהם ומת. So it's several views. One said it was a bad scorpion, bad snake that bite the person and died. There is another version that was a very hot weather. He didn't cover himself properly and he passed. You remember when we studied Book of Kings, second Book of Kings, chapter 14, the story of the son of the Shunammite that passed because of the heat. You know, people can get
heat stroke. Yeah.
What?
Heat stroke.
Heat stroke.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what happened is, Ubat Ishto, his wife came, Vehodi'a levet din. She declared before the bet din that he is gone. Veshalchu umatz'u kidvareha. The bet din sent an emissaries, and they check, and it turns that it's true. באותה שעה אמרו, האישה שאמרה מת בעלי תינשא. At that moment, the sages concluded that if a woman come before us and said, my husband is gone, she can be trustworthy and she can go and marry. So Tosfot said that the issue here is we have the subject of aginut in other cases, but there is a lot of discussion what exactly happened and how. For example, when it's come to zihui halalim, there are special experts that identify bodies. Identified meaning nowadays we have the DNA, but even the DNA, there are cases, for example, ashes, for example, just bone, etc., that you need, like in the army they have the doggy tag. But here, that if you do not trust her, or you don't take her word, you have chashash aginut, that basically those heartbroken wives can be without a husband for the rest of their life, or if they are young, they cannot have children, etc. So that's the reason why you see again and again that the rabbis are lenient. Now, also in an incident that they do not have children, but you have a brother, again, the subject of ייבום, met ba'ali tityabem. That's what we study on 114b. So now we try to juxtapose the disputation here between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel to others. Neima Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva veRabbanan biflugta de Beit Shammai uBeit Hillel kamifligei, which means you can match these two disputations. The Tanya. לא יישא אדם מי חטאת ואפר חטאת ויעבירם בגרזן ובספינה. A person should not carry a water of purification, which means the water containing the ashes of a red heifer for the ritual purification of one who become impure through contact with the corpse, and ashes of purification of the red heifer, and transport them on the Jordan River. And one may not transfer them across the river of boat. ויעבירם בירדן ובספינה. ולא יעמוד בצד זה ויזרוק לצד אחר, ולא ישיתם על גבי המים, should not stand one side of the river and throw it to the other, nor flow them over the water that he crosses. ולא ירכיבם על גבי בהמה, or not ride an animal across the river. ולא על גבי חברו, not the back of the animal or another person. אלא אם כן היו רגליו נוגעות בקרקע, only if he is touching the ground, אבל מעבירם על הגשר, he can transport them over the bridge. אחד ירדן ואחד שאר נהרות, makes no difference if it's a Jordan River or other rivers. רבי חנניה בן עקיבא אומר לו, אמרו לה ירדן ובספינה, וכמה said this specifically, the Jordan, the boat, and the incidents that occurred that you have the issue of ritual impurity was found in the boat on the Jordan River. לימה רבנן דאמרי כבית שמאי ורבי חנינא בן עקיבא דאמר כבית הלל, you see it's a matching. אומר לי רבנן אנא דאמרינן אף כבית הלל, עד כאן לא כאמר בית הלל הטעם אלא משום דמרתת, over there because she is scared. במקום קרוב מרתת, מקום רחוק לא מרתת. If it's a close by, in proximity, so we believe that she is scared to give false testimony, as her lie can easily be discovered. But if it's far away, she's not scared to be untruthful. Here in our incidents, what's the differentiation between Jordan and other rivers? רבי חנניה בן עקיבא אמר לך, אנא דאמרי אב לבית שמאי כמה בית שמאי טעם אלא משום דהי די כמינא אסווה, because she's checking very carefully before she gets married. מה לי מקום קרוב, מה לי מקום רחוק? What's the difference between close proximity or far away distance? משום שהיה בירדן ובספינה דבר מעשה גזור רבנן. Specifically the sages put decree because of specific incidents that happened over there. בשאר נהרות, the other rivers, לא ומעשה לא גזרו רבנן. It wasn't a incident, so therefore the sages did not put a decree. מה מעשה שהיה? What exactly the story involved here? דאמר רב יהודה אמר רב מעשה בן אדם אחד שעמד במחתת ובחתת בספינה. It was incidents of a fellow that was transporting water of purification and ashes of purification on a Jordan river, and on the boat, in the boat, ונמצא כזית מן המת תפוחו בקרקעית של ספינה. And it was כזית, as we explained, that that's sufficient to carry a ritual impurity, so it's an olive bark of a corpse was found stuck on the bottom of the boat, which rendered the water and ashes ritually impure. באותה שעה אמרו, as a result, the sages said, לא יעשה אדם מי חטאת והפך הדעת, the person may not carry water of purification and ashes of purification, ויעבירם בירדן בספינה, and transport them to the Jordan and Jordan River in another boat. So you see later, sages dispute whether this decree applied to similar cases or only the exact circumstances of this specific incident.
ויחם לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי